You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, world, and welcome to Tales from Hollywoodland, a veritable feast of movies, television, Broadway, showbiz stories, and even a little bit of news and gossip, with Julian Schlossberg, Arthur E. Friedman, and Stephen J. Rubin. Today, we're talking about the greatest detective movies. And now, here's Steve.
Hey guys, this is going to be an exciting show. You know, it's funny. I was trying to think back on the very first books I ever read, and I think I can safely say that I picked up the Hardy Boys. Now, I know the Hardy Boys aren't exactly movie detectives, but I feel like I was born in that detective world because I was eager to just read all those Hardy Boy books by, I think it was Franklin W. Dixon, or was it, yeah, Franklin W. Dixon. The father of the Hardy Boys was Fenton Hardy. So Fenton and Franklin. Were you guys readers of the Hardy Boys when you were little?
Absolutely, 100%.
Ah.
No, I was not.
I think we have to begin our discussion of great detective movies. We got to go back a few years. Basil Rathbone was considered by many to be the most ideal actor to play Sherlock Holmes.
And in the Bronx, New York, we called him Raise Hell in the Bathroom. Honest to God.
Well, he was mostly, at least in my household, Basil Rathbone was your go-to villain. I mean, back in the 50s, he was doing all those Roger Corman horror movies, and he certainly played villain to Danny Kaye and many other actors, Tyrone Power and Mark of Zorro. But obviously, in the Sherlock Holmes movies, he's a good guy. And this is what I was interested to find out, that the first two Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce Sherlock Holmes movies were produced on major budgets by 20th Century Fox in 1939, that great year of movies. But there was a problem with the rights situation with the Arthur Conan Doyle estate, so they lost the rights and Universal picked them up. But Universal picked them up to be B movies, and they moved the timeline ahead from Victorian era to World War II. So all the Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce movies of the 40s are actually World War II detective stories.
And very successful, Steve.
Very successful, and apparently they just ended because Basil Rathbone felt like he was doing the same role each time. He wanted to move on.
Well, you know, I want to say that this genre is a very rich genre. It's been around in movies forever. You can go anywhere and you'll find Philo Vance or The Thin Man, Agatha Christie. All of her books seem to have converted beautifully to movies. It's a great...
Even Miss Marple.
Yeah.
Murder, She Wrote, and Murder So Sweet.
Margaret Rutherford, what a woman.
Yes. Would we call Witness for the Prosecution in that genre?
Sure.
Why not?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of one of the greatest movies ever made.
I would also call that a courtroom drama.
Yeah, and they often overlapped.
Right.
Tremendously, you know. But I guess if it's detectives, we should be sticking with maybe Gene Hackman in French Connection and Steve McQueen in Bullet and stuff like that, even though we never have to be pigeonholed, not our group.
Well, there's a fine line there because there is the police detective, and then there's the private detective, and then there's the FBI detective. Clarice Starling, Jodie Foster's character in Silence of the Lambs, is a FBI detective. So there's a fine line now, but I love references to Steve McQueen since I've always loved Steve's work. And Bullet is certainly a good one, although there's elements of Bullet that don't make any sense. For instance, that iconic Mustang he drives in that movie, Arthur?
Yeah.
No police radio. So he's chasing the bad guys in one of the great chases of all time. He can't call anybody. No backup. Come on.
Hey, listen, if you're gonna have a Mustang, that comes with the territory. But there's so many movies, and I remember the movie I was so surprised at was L.A. Confidential. I was surprised at how terrific I thought the movie was, but also that it got made with two Australian leads. And when I did some investigation, I find out that the producer didn't want these two guys, didn't want Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce, because they weren't going to give him box office. So Curtis Hanson, who was the director, very smartly put in Kevin Spacey, Danny DeVito, Kim Basinger, and of course, then the movie got financed. So it's interesting. I think there are very few film noirs that you could say were shot in color, since noir itself is the word for black in French. But I would say L.A. Confidential and Chinatown are two of the best film noirs in Technicolor. Would you guys agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
Particularly.
Chinatown is one of the great movies, period.
Period. Jake Gittes. By the way, I finally watched the sequel to Chinatown. It's called The Two Jakes. Terrible. Just
Bad.
It was terrible, Steve.
it was
This was not Jack Nicholson at his best as a director, because he directed it.
Yeah, and Robert Towne as a writer, he just was repeating a lot of the formula from the first one. We should probably talk about remakes in a future show, because invariably they're terrible.
Invariably, Godfather 2 broke the mold.
But that wasn't technically a remake. That is a sequel.
Yes. Well, I thought you meant the sequel as well as remakes.
No, just remakes. Remakes invariably are terrible, but
remakes, you're right. They are the worst most of the time.
Terrible. And it's funny because I was looking at our list of detectives we want to discuss today. We certainly have to talk about Raymond Chandler's Philip Marlowe, who certainly is probably the archetype detective of all time, starting with our old friend Humphrey Bogart back in the day in The Big Sleep. Was there a better, more edgy detective than Humphrey Bogart's Philip Marlowe?
What was the first of those guys?
Maybe Sam Spade in
Right.
The Maltese Falcon.
There you go.
Maybe
They were from the same cloth, just different fabric.
Yeah, that's right. But he was. It's interesting about those older movies, Maltese Falcon, Double Indemnity. I mean, there's so many of these movies are so, I think, special. But Arthur was right. They continue to make. That's one genre that has never gone out of style in the movies. And I remember when I got to know Bob Towne pretty well, and this was a trilogy. I don't know if you knew that was what he wanted to do. It was going to start out with Chinatown, then The Two Jakes, and then it was going to be Gittes versus Gittes. That was going to be the third, but everything changed when The Two Jakes tanked.
That name Gittes, Julian and guys, was really a Jack Nicholson very dear friend was a guy named Harry Gittes. Harry Gittes was knew my partner, Roger Lockwood, from college, and they knew each other very well. And Harry Gittes was very close to Jack Nicholson, and I got to know Harry, but that's where the Gittes name came from. But when I got to know Harry, he made a movie called Harry and Walter Go to New York. He produced it, and but by coincidence, Harry and I were going to have lunch Monday in LA, and I was supposed to go to the studio and meet him. I think it was Columbia Burbank, and so I drove. The picture died over the weekend, and I drove in, and Harry said, "Just park next to my parking spot." And I drive to his parking spot, and while I'm driving into that parking spot, the guy with a paintbrush painting out Harry's name. Because the movie was such a catastrophe, and that morning he got instructions, get rid of him, so his parking spot went with it.
I think that was Jimmy Caan and Elliot Gould, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, it didn't work. This movie didn't
work.
work.
I prefer the John Huston way of pronouncing the name, Arthur. Mr. Gittes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
What a great movie. Chinatown was an all-time great movie. Really kept you guessing until the end. It was a riveting film. What was that in the 1970s?
74, I believe.
Yeah.
11 Academy Award nominations. And interestingly enough, only Bob won for screenplay.
I think that was the year of Godfather Part 2, so they just had to stay in the shadow. I have to say the success of that movie has to also be attributed to Jerry Goldsmith's score. The music is very,
the theme was unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
No, it's one of the great melodies.
I met Jerry Goldsmith. I was asked to look at a movie that he was going to score called The Other. You guys remember that movie, The Other?
I do.
Supernatural.
It was based on a Tom Tryon novel that was very successful. And Robert Mulligan directed it. And so Mulligan and I and Goldsmith went to watch the movie, and it was great to talk to him about, film and music. And he was really a very lovely guy, easy to speak to. It was very, very nice. But that, I think, is one of the great movie scores of all time. All time. You know how this whole thing happened? Bob Evans, who was running Paramount Production, went to Bob Town and offered him $175,000 to adapt The Great Gatsby to the screen. And Town didn't want to do it, but he said, look, if you give me $25,000, I'll give you a movie called Chinatown, which I've been working on for a long time. And that's how it began. It's kind of fun that it happened that way.
Always fascinating to hear those kind of stories. Always.
Yeah. And Polanski, who became the director, I was working at Paramount at the time, and I asked Bob, why Polanski? And he said he had found that if you could get to a director who was really on not doing as well, but had done well, he said Polanski, after Rosemary's Baby, didn't have that much of a career. So he went after him. He went after Frankenheimer for Black Sunday, and he went after Schlesinger for the film that he produced. All of these guys had fallen on hard times, and it was a very clever way of said as long as he felt they had talent and they had done good movies, he would take a chance with them. And that was kind of an interesting philosophy, I thought.
These days we refer to it as directors who are in director jail.
Who said that?
In around town amongst the writers and producers. I know.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Always loved Evans' nickname for Polanski. Get me to Polak.
Yeah. Polanski was very adamant about he wanted Faye Dunaway. Most of the people at that time were pushing Jane Fonda to be the girl in that movie. But Polanski was adamant, and he got Faye, and then they had terrible times together. Horrible times. They did not work well together at all.
You know why, Julian?
Well, I could tell you what I think, but I'd rather not say.
Uh-huh. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I do know why.
She was great in the movie.
And the movie's great. So, but often, as all of us know, the movie can be a horror show, and then it turns out okay, even though people stop talking with each other and whatever, You
guys ever see the movie The Detective Story with Kirk Douglas?
Sure.
Lee Grant. Film. Yeah.
William Wyler.
First movie. Yeah.
William Wyler directed. Yes. Eleanor Parker plays Kirk's character's wife. I remember.
Steve, do you know who the screenwriter was of that movie?
Of Detective Story?
Yes. Because there's a line in that movie that always was one of the all-time great lines when he thinks she's been cheating or something, and he says
Sidney Kingsley may have been.
The line is I have to wash my brain out with these dirty pictures in my mind or something. In the typical Kirk Douglas, that forced voice. I always love when Michael Douglas was asked to impress his father. You always say, "Well, which one you want? You want the easy Kirk, or you want the angry Kirk?"
The script was written It's actually based on Sidney Kingsley's play, Julian, but it was co-written by Philip Jordan and Robert Weiler. I think that might be William's brother.
Huh. Okay.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, another wonderful movie that we have talked about in the past and mentioned was The French Connection, and how terrific a film that was. And it's amazing to me when you realize the history of that movie. National General, and Arthur, you'll remember that company, National General, were the original owners of that property. And they just decided against making it and went to Zanuck Brown, and they went to Fox, and they got it made. You want to guess the budget?
Yes. French Connection budget?
Yeah.
I'm guessing 1971, 72, $5 million.
Steve, you want to go?
I'm with Arthur. I'd say maybe a little lower, 3.5.
1.5. Billy went over 20%, came in at 1.8.
Never knew that. Wow.
Today 1.8 buys you borscht.
Yes, and not even with sour cream.
You know what the budget of Midnight Cowboy was? 1969? $3 million. Gross $35 million in those days.
And what was the budget of The Great Escape in 1963?
$5 million.
$4 million.
All right.
Do you know how much? How much Netflix spent on Electric? I think it's called Electric City. It's like a special effects extravaganza that everybody hates. $320 million.
Oh,
well, I guess that's a little more than the 1.5.
Didn't Scorsese get about $200 million for The Irishman?
How long can the movie business survive when people spending money like this? It's funny.
It can survive as long as you've got Netflix taking in billions of dollars every year.
True. No, that is true, but
that's easy.
Julian, not every year, Julian, every month.
Every month, right.
And they don't even have to collect it, Julian. They just press the bank buttons and it lands in their account.
There it is.
The golden goose.
I was interested in learning, I don't know if you guys knew this, that Bill Macy, William H. Macy, a fine actor, was came into Fargo in a small role. He wasn't supposed to be Jerry. He wasn't supposed to be the lead. And they liked him, the Coen brothers, but they said, how about you try out for Jerry too? And he did, and they said, oh, that's pretty good. He went back to California, and they kept looking for people for Jerry. Anyhow, Macy, who's a pretty conservative fellow, wanted that role so bad, he flew back to New York, went to the Coen brothers and said, let me do it again. I can do this. This is my role. And they did, and he got the role. That's Frances was terrific. Frances McDormand, she won the Academy Award. She was great in Fargo.
If you thought about
Bill Macy was sensational.
Oh yeah, well, if you think about the archetype detective, the edgy Humphrey Bogart in the trench coat, how far from that is her Marge Gunderson? I mean, to cast the character as a pregnant police officer to being the detective it's just a very darkly comic show as well. I mean, when they're putting one of the characters in the wood chipper,
it was really an unusual movie, and Arthur worked with the Coen brothers, so he knew them pretty well.
Well, I didn't work.
That was their breakout, wasn't it, Arthur? That was their breakout one. Their
breakout was Raising Arizona.
It did that much?
Oh yes, Raising Arizona was a big hit. Raising Arizona first of all, my partner and I invested with Circle Productions and Circle Films in Joel Neathan's first four movies. The first one was Blood Simple, a very good movie that we distributed under the Circle banner, but then came Raising Arizona, Miller's Crossing, and Barton Fink. Raising Arizona cost $5.6 million, which was the budget for it. They came in right on the nose and grossed at that time theatrical $24 million. and has made lots of money in the afterlife, through the years. I believe one of the best things they ever did was Miller's Crossing, talking about a detective story. Miller's Crossing didn't get there. It didn't make it, but what a great movie.
It is interesting to know that Fargo did better in foreign than it did in domestic. It did 24 million domestic, 36 million foreign. So Fargo did $60 million. Now, of course, part of it, I think, was her winning the Academy Award for Best Actress. I mean, I think that probably helped overseas a lot.
It does. The Academy Awards mean more overseas in terms of box office than they do domestic. But generally speaking, the foreign markets are bigger than domestic on almost anything.
Most things. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Joel Nathan's breakout movie clearly was Raising Arizona. It was a hit.
I'd like to mention Alfred Hitchcock for a minute. And particularly a movie of his which has its huge fans and some detractors. It didn't do well. Vertigo. And Jimmy Stewart plays Scotty, the police detective at the beginning of the movie, who suffers an incident which gives him, what do they call it, Julian, when you have fear of heights?
Agoraphobia, is it?
Agoraphobia, I think. Yeah. And that, speaking of music, I mean, if you watch Vertigo, Bernard Herrmann's music is so haunting in that movie. But this is an interesting twist of a detective story. I always found that to be a good movie. You guys have any thoughts on Vertigo?
I was surprised that Vertigo is considered his best movie by a lot of critics. And I like the movie, but I think I could name 4 or 5 movies I like better that Hitchcock did than Vertigo.
Word for word, I would agree. To me, it was just not as great. Somebody came out some years ago and said Vertigo is the greatest movie ever made. And whoever that person was loses all credibility. It's not the greatest movie ever made. It's a good movie. I wasn't really a big fan of it, but that, it's all subjective. I know Scorsese loves it, and that counts a lot too because his taste is outstanding.
Well,
but
Hitchcock
didn't do it for me.
No, it didn't do well at all. In fact, Hitchcock was smarting, and he realized that his next movie better be a hit. So that's when he came up with North by Northwest, which is my favorite Hitchcock movie.
Oh, that's a sensational, great movie until they hit Mount Rushmore. And to me, Mount Rushmore, I'm ready to kill myself. I don't care if they get caught in the nose. It means nothing. It just goes on and on. And that movie was so tight and so good up until that moment. But boy, I got so bored on Rushmore.
Has anybody here ever seen James Mason do a bad movie? James Mason.
No.
He's
giant he was of acting, huh?
Not very sporting of you using real bullets.
Oh, Steve, you're great with that stuff.
Our mutual friend Avi does the best impression of James Mason, but I think that Hitchcock. It's funny. Another one of my favorites of his. There's a detective in Rear Window, but it's not a main character. Wendell Corey plays Scotty's friend.
But I would still consider it in our group.
Yeah. I mean essentially Jimmy Stewart again is playing a detective, except he's stuck in his his broken leg and he's looking at those windows. That is by far the best movie to watch on a Saturday night for my money. Rear Window.
Well, I have to say I've never seen Perry Mason so offensive.
Lars Thorwald. That movie not only has you on the edge of your seat, it has you on the edge of your windowsill.
You know what, Steve? The intimacy of the way he shot that movie, where you're looking out that window with him and with Grace Kelly and Thelma Ritter, who was great in everything she ever did. The intimacy of it was just great. The dancing with Ross Bagdasarian, which no one seems to know, that guy who was the piano player, became the guy who did the Chipmunks.
Alvin and the Chipmunks, absolutely. Yeah. And then, of course, there was Miss Torso, Always fun to watch.
Oh my golly, yes. I couldn't wait for her to work out.
That's right. And the sad woman who was lonely and all that.
Oh
What a
yeah.
great
That's
movie.
Miss Lonely Hearts.
It's Lonely Hearts, yeah. You know, another movie that was so sensational for the time and stands up and is with a director that Arthur knew well is In the Heat of the Night. What a wonderful film that is. And they did call him Virgil Tibbs. They call me Virgil Tibbs. I mean, come on, that was great. You know, in the novel of that, which is called In the Heat of the Night, it's based on a novel by a guy named John Boyle, B-A-L-L. In that, there's no slapping scene by the black man. The white man smacks him, and he just takes it. But in that movie, Sidney said, I want to slap him back. And they were afraid. They were afraid, but he did it. And what a difference. I mean, nobody watching that movie, you had to be shocked. I mean, and the actor's guy named Larry Gates, I think he was shocked.
He was terrific.
It's interesting. You probably are, when you're seeing that scene, you're seeing a major turning point in the way blacks are portrayed in film. I mean, my God, that was like the freeing of the slaves itself. And
well, Steve, the concept of the movie, the concept of the script, of having this highly intelligent black detective landing in Yemensville, Mississippi, wherever it was, Sparta, Mississippi, and getting involved with a incredible character of Rod Steiger, who was just in his own misery of life as the police officer, and his cast of characters. That movie worked like a charm. The thing I remember about it is working for United Artists. I'd seen it while I was working in Washington in the summer of '67. And truth of the matter is, it never did that much business. It did okay, in its first place, but it got the Academy Award. Everybody thought the Academy Award was going to Dustin Hoffman or to The Graduate for sure. And it turned out that it was In the Heat of the Night, and it did nothing but business as of April of 1968, when the public, got it. But great concept.
That was in the days that if you won the Academy Award, you grossed. It doesn't guarantee it that anymore, as we know. Even another United Artists film, Annie Hall, didn't go crazy at the box office, even after it won the best picture of the year. So,
yeah, but Julian, today in today's world, when these pictures are winning the Academy Award, a lot of them are little art films that just have a limited audience under any circumstances.
You're right. They're right.
It's a rule of thumb that if a film is nominated for Best Picture these days, no one's seen it.
All right. Except the voters in the Academy or something, right?
Sidney Poitier and Rod Steiger were the first choices. We talk about, like I said, Jane Fonda for Faye Dunaway, and we talk about it a lot, but they were always from the beginning the first choices. And they were friends. They knew each other well. They were New York actors who knew each other quite well. So that worked out well. And then Lee Grant came in and Scott Wilson. I mean, it was quite an interesting cast that Jewison put together. And you got Quincy Jones's music. I mean, there's a lot of great things. And who edited that movie? You guys remember?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Andrew. Tell me.
Hal Ashby.
Yes.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah. Before he started directing, he was the editor of In the Heat of the Night. So.
And let us not forget Ray Charles singing In the Heat of the Night.
Yeah.
Ray Charles.
The opening credits, was it?
Who?
Was it the opening credits that he sang it?
It was the closing credit. Closing when the train's going out.
Oh, okay.
Well, we're talking about how it changed black cinema in a sense. But I'll tell you a performer that probably changed detective cinema dramatically around the same time, or a little bit earlier, was Peter Sellers as Inspector Clouseau.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, obviously Peter Sellers had been around for a while. He's a marvelous talent. We've talked about him in Dr. Strangelove, but that's, I think, the same year he did Dr. Strangelove, he did the Pink Panther. And he's just one of the characters. He's not the character in that movie because it's obviously David Niven's in it and Robert Wagner. But
that begat Shot in the Dark.
And they got shot in the dark. I mean, this was a very funny series of movies that went on and on and on. In fact, I think we got a new Clouseau, didn't we? We got
Alan Arkin.
Thank you. We got Alan Arkin as Clouseau. I mean, but even Peter Sellers came back after doing it for a while. He came back again, and those movies were just funny. Just the way his use of the French accent was just funny. I remember he walks into a hotel, and there's the person at the desk has a dog on the desk, and he says to the clerk, he says, "Does your dog bite?" And the clerk said, "No." And of course, he goes to touch the dog, and it bites him. He said, "I thought you said your dog did not bite." And the clerk says, "It is not my dog."
Oh. Blake Edwards, yes, sir.
But every once in a while you sit back and we watch so many movies, all four of us, but the opening credits with that Pink Panther and guns being shot and things, it was so unusual. It was just some of the best opening credits I've ever seen.
But Julian, in that period of time, they were doing those openings with all of these little cartoon things but they just hit the nail on the head. They did bingo. The Pink Panther thing worked.
Well, you also have to give a credit to Henry Mancini's music and dun 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 dun. Just a great score. And
Henry Mancini was about as good as it gets for scoring out of a field of maybe 20 of those really great guys. It couldn't be better than Henry Mancini. I got to tell you guys, the Pink Panther begat cartoons as well. They had Pink Panther cartoons, and we sell them for like $5 a piece to theaters. There was one exhibitor in Kennebunkport, Maine, that was into us so badly, she owed us $125 on Pink Panther cartoons.
Did she ever pay?
Yeah, she paid. She had to.
She should have gone to George H.W. Bush.
Yes, right. The Bushes in Kennebunkport, of course.
Yeah. Well, how about a great movie like The Untouchables, the one with Sean Connery and Kevin Costner? What a terrific remake of a television show that was. I was really taken away from it. I thought it was just a terrific film.
Wasn't that written by David Mamet, Julian?
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
he did.
And directed by Brian De Palma.
Palma's probably his best movie for me.
Probably his best movie, absolutely. I'd like to go back to 1958 and Orson Welles as Hank Quinlan in Touch of
Evil.
Yes. And he shares the screen with Charlton Heston playing a Mexican, which of course could never happen today. But
not without picketing.
Not without picketing. But and Orson Welles has probably never looked as fat and unattractive as he did as Hank Quinlan. I'll tell you.
Steve, how about that when you drive down to Venice Beach, that you see exactly where they shot that movie?
Yes, exactly. Right there. Exactly.
What's the name of that street? Is that...
I think it's called Channel, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it's near Washington Boulevard. No,
it's way to Marina Del Rey.
The opening, the original opening has that again, with the film music, it's Henry Mancini, and it's another one of those all-in-one shot moments where they follow the car that's going to be, about to be blown up, and it's beautifully done. However, apparently, and I just don't understand it, Orson Welles did not like Henry Mancini's music over that opening sequence. He did not like it, which is insane because it's perfectly tuned to that. So when they re-released the movie onto a Blu-ray, they took out the opening music. And I thought that was just strange, very strange.
That may have been the agreement to re-release it with the Welles estate, which I handled for a while. So I wasn't involved with that, though. But that may have been the agreement to get it done. But it is interesting. Janet Leigh was so luscious in that movie. as she was in most movies. And how about a Kim Tamara? I mean, he's almost like Igor in Young Frankenstein. I mean, he's like,
Igor. Guys, we can't discuss this genre without mentioning the Thin Man series from the 30s. William Powell, Myrna Loy. They made some great movies that stand up to this day. They play beautifully on TCM. You all watch them? You ever seen them before? The old ones? Great.
Sure, of course.
And
a dog Astor.
Yeah, Astor the dog, yeah.
I've heard of them for years, guys, but I have to say I need to catch up on my Thin Man.
You, of all people, Steve, you would love those movies.
Yes. Now, there's the Thin Man, but there's also the Third Man, which...
now we're talking about great music in a movie.
Yes. Orson Welles, Trevor Howard, just a very, very interesting movie.
With an instrument called a zephyr. I think it was a zephyr.
That's what it was.
A new instrument that we found out about as kids.
And very, very beautiful black and white photography and the chases in the sewers underneath. Oh my God!
Directed by who, Julian?
Carol Reed, I believe.
Carol Reed, exactly.
Yeah. Joseph Cotton.
Joseph Cotton. Well, they were close friends, Orson Welles and Joseph Cotton. They started together in the Mercury Theater, and they remained friends throughout Welles's life. I met Joseph Cotton through Orson Welles' daughter. So at the end of his life, sadly, he had a voice box. He was unable to speak without it. But it was still great to have lunch with him. And
certainly a unique movie star, right? He was had his own kind of Joe Cotton thing. Yeah.
He did. He really did. But his greatest for me was Hitchcock's Shadow of a Doubt. Oh, golly. Uncle Charlie. What a movie.
Scary movie.
A terrific film.
Yeah.
He's also very good when he plays Marilyn Monroe's husband in Niagara.
Yes.
Good movie there, too. I'd like to go to another comedic side. I'd like to go to essentially one of the more unique movies that Robert Zemeckis has ever directed. It's called Who Framed Roger Rabbit? And the actor who plays Eddie Valiant, the British actor, and I'm forgetting his name for the moment. You'll know him, Julian.
I'm trying to remember. Bob Hoskins.
Bob Hoskins. Thank you very much. And that movie. If you've never seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it's one of the more inventive movies of the '80s. In terms of just the idea of introducing the fact that animated characters can interact with live action characters. And
Stanley Donen did that with Tom and Jerry and Gene Kelly. Jerry the cartoon.
Anchors Away?
And yes, and Stanley told me they went to Walt Disney to get Mickey Mouse. And Walt Disney almost threw them out. Are you kidding? I'm not going to let Mickey Mouse be in an MGM movie.
There are turf wars even then. It's funny. I mentioned earlier the $320 million Electric City movie on Netflix. That also is a movie that blends, animated characters with human characters. Although they're not animated characters like in Roger Rabbit, because with the digital effects these days, they look like real people or real characters, but they're not animated.
You know what Jimmy Cagney said when he met Mickey Mouse? You dirty rat. Red buttons. Thank you, Red. Yeah.
Steve, for $320 million, they should own an animated studio.
It's these numbers are just off the chart.
Obscene amount of money. I'll tell you one of my favorite movies with an incredible detective, so to speak, in a way, was Charade. One of the best movies. I just think it's one of the finest action films and just terrific.
Talk about a score.
And then great score again, Mancini again. But you've got Matthau, you've got Cary Grant, you've got Audrey Hepburn, and then you've got the three bad guys, and James Coburn and George Kennedy and Ned Glass from the West Side Story. his little candy store owner. But I like
Also,
that film.
Ned Glass also has a great line in North by Northwest where Cary Grant comes up to the train counter and says, "I'd like to buy a ticket." And he says, he's wearing sunglasses, and Ned Glass says, "Something wrong with your eyes, mister?" And Cary says, "Yes, they're sensitive to questions."
Yeah. But Ned's going to turn him in, and he's going to try, but Barry figured it out.
Figured it out. You're in luck, mister. And then he's gone. No, absolutely.
Out of this rich genre that we're talking about, what do you think would be the Star Wars of the genre? What is the biggest hit detective movie ever made? There's got to be such a thing. There's got to be one movie.
I think you probably nailed it earlier, Arthur. I would have to say Chinatown is probably
may have been the best, but I don't know that it was the biggest in terms of box
I wonder
office.
if it will be French Connection.
Could be.
I would guess French Connection off. I don't know, but I would guess because, as we've said a lot of action in that for the foreign market. You know, a lot of car chases.
I have a feeling, Julian, it might have been Bullet, though. If it was both,
could be
close for sure.
Right. Could be.
No. Dick Tracy never did it. That Warren did.
It did business. It wasn't a flop.
No, it wasn't a flop.
The French Connection did 52 million US in Canada, but I'll bet you, the one I just mentioned, I bet Who Framed Roger Rabbit did better.
Well, that was 87.
I'm
not sure I'd put that in the same league as these kind of movies, though.
No, it's true. It's true. Technically, it is a detective story, and it did.
Both Bullet and then there was also Dirty Harry. Including that, he was a detective.
For the record,
I've noticed that none of us have come up with a current movie at all. Maybe Knives Out. What do you think? Knives Out, was that a big hit?
The first one did very well, prompting the second one. I thought both movies were very overrated, but people seem to like Daniel Craig moving nicely from James Bond into playing a Southern police detective.
Not one of the great dialects ever done, though, on film.
No, I found the movies just not very good, but that's just my opinion.
Let's just say, for the sake of conversation, that Bullet with Steve McQueen, that movie was brand new. Just let's say it was. How big would it be in today's world? I'll bet you that film would do $500 million worldwide. Given the same star, if it was possible, the same story, that car chase thing, what a commercial movie that was.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, Arthur, because Warner Brothers is remaking it with Bradley Cooper playing Bullet.
Makes sense.
So there you go. I will say right now, like all remakes, I don't think it's going to do very well. But again, that's just my opinion.
I would go with Brad Pitt. With great respect to Bradley Cooper, I would go with more of a Brad Pitt kind of look in that.
Well, the question though is, can you guys think of any movie? And I asked our wonderful producer Mike Faber too, because he knows more about current movies than I do. Is there any in the last, 10 years that are big detective movies?
Mike? I'm thinking.
Anything ring a bell? Julian, the fact of life is that
sounded like Jack Benny in
spandex.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, I sound like Jack Benny. Your money or your life?
I'm thinking.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, it's interesting that a genre that has spawned such incredible movies doesn't have anything we can point to, or even if we do, it'll be one or two. And yet, look at the history of these kind of terrific films, and we only touched on it. There's a wonderful movie called DOA. They remade it, but Edmund O'Brien, fantastic.
Whoa.
A Robert Mitchum movie, Out of the Past, terrific. Missing, Jack Lemmon and Sissy Spade. It goes on and on with these really interesting films, and we're having trouble come up with anything relatively recent.
Actually, there were a couple. I know.
Come on, Mike.
Kenneth Branagh did some remakes of the Agatha Christie movies recently,
Murder on the Orient Express.
and also Death on the Nile,
Death on the Nile.
and also Murder in Venice. And those were all very, very well done. And I think his mustache was the co-star in those films, which were quite well done.
Murder on the Orient Express was a big hit movie.
Yes.
With a sensational cast, the original,
Right.
directed by Sidney Lumet.
Here's a movie from 2014 that I think got a lot of attention and did very well worldwide, directed by David Fincher. It's called Gone Girl.
A huge bestseller.
Huge bestseller,
Oh.
did $371 million worldwide gross. And this is a movie, Fincher does a lot of thrillers, and this is Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike. So there's an example of
Well, that's good. I'm glad we came up with one, or maybe
Yeah,
we'll
that's
come.
only
Did you
11.
How
guys-
much did it do, Steve?
What'd you say?
How much did it do?
371 worldwide.
Wow.
Did you ever guys see a movie called The Highwayman? It was with Woody Harrelson and who was it also? Kevin Costner. It was a story about the detectives who hunted down Bonnie and Clyde. And it
Yeah,
was
Vaguely remember it.
yeah.
That's a bad title for a guy who hunted down Bonnie and Clyde. What a lousy title.
Yeah, it was a fun movie though. It was really, really well done.
What about the Dirty Harry sequence of movies? They were big hits.
Well, here's another David
He's a
Fincher.
detective.
Here's another David Fincher movie from 1995, which also is a big popular movie called Seven.
Yes.
It's about tracking down a serial killer. Now that movie did 329 million worldwide. So there's another example of a movie that's not that old. I mean, well, actually, it is old. It's 30 years old this year. Unbelievable.
Well, at least there's a couple. I'm happy to say, but I don't know if they'll live the way Chinatown and French Connection and The Heat of the Night. These are superb movies. Superb.
Usual Suspects was not a detective movie, was it?
No. Not
It's a
really.
strange movie. Kaiser Sose. Hell of a movie.
There's Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck, who's a very good director, did the movie The Town about those robbers in Boston. That's now quietly 15 years ago. That's 2010.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, Mr. John Hamm, who of course we know from Mad Men and so many other things, he plays the detective in that, and he has to track down these robbers. That was
Right.
very good. That's
Did you guys ever see the remake that John Hamm did of Fletch?
yes,
And that was really well done also.
that was well done too. Fletch Lives. I think it's called Fletch Lives.
Yes.
Yes.
Wasn't Jodie Foster a detective in The Silence of the Lambs?
Yes, we
Yes.
talked
Yeah.
about earlier.
He brought that up earlier.
Ooh.
Clarice Starling, absolutely.
Yes.
And then, we talked about Clouseau, and we talked about Murder on the Orient Express. Of course, Murder on the Orient Express is Hercule Poirot.
Right. That's what I brought up.
Yeah, the French detective, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And they did a horrible remake of the Pink Panther movies with Steve Martin a couple
Yes.
years back. Oh, it was
That's what I was trying to-
horrid. And I don't know if you ever saw a movie with Ben Affleck, because you guys brought him up earlier, called Gone Girl. Also,
Oh.
that was
Yeah,
also a really well done film.
I think we all did, and we found out it's a gigantic grossing movie.
Yeah, 370 million worldwide. So that did very well. I think the detective genre can be very alive if Hollywood could take a few dollars from its special effects superhero movies and devote them to the detective genre, which of course I've been saying forever about comedy as well.
Mm-hmm.
I
Well,
want to
they
see a hell of a
also,
movie. Maybe have nothing to do with this, guys, but Ben Affleck for sure, called The Accountant. Going in, you figure, what is this? Great movie.
Mhm. They also did a Sherlock Holmes film not that long ago, and they're actually talking about bringing out a third one with Robert Downey Jr. as
Right.
Sherlock Holmes.
And back in the 80s, they even did Young Sherlock Holmes.
Right.
Which-
That was done by Steven Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis.
Robert Zemeckis, exactly. Very, very good
Wasn't
film.
there a Billy Wilder Young Sherlock Holmes 2 or a Sherlock Holmes movie?
Yes,
It's called
there was a Billy Wilder.
The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes with Robert Stevens. It's
Married at one point to Maggie Smith.
Mhm. There also was a film probably about now 25 years ago with Bill Pullman and I think it was Ben Affleck. Not Ben Affleck. It was called Zero Effect. And it was, modern take on the Sherlock Holmes type thing. It had Ben Stiller as the co-star. And very, very well, smart movie. It didn't do very well at the theater, but it got a cult following.
But there's unlike Agatha Christie, the Sherlock Holmes movie has never broken through. Agatha Christie had several of those books became huge movies. Sherlock Holmes never has. I think Barry Levinson may have made one too in the 80s.
Also, Gene Wilder made one. I think it was Sherlock Holmes's younger brother.
That's right. That's right.
But also Sherlock Holmes has done very, very well on television, though. They have had multiple TV series. And same thing with Hercule Poirot, doing all the different murder mysteries for Agatha Christie on PBS. But BBC had their Sherlock series, and they also, CBS recently had an Elementary series featuring Sherlock Holmes.
Look how fantastic all those years that Angela Lansbury did Murder, She Wrote. All those years of
Jessica Fletcher. And of course, if you're going to mention Jessica Fletcher, Julian, you got to mention Columbo.
Okay, Steve. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, well, you're right.
We're going to have to
TV
do a
series.
show. We'll do a show on TV detectives because there's only about 2,000 of them.
Barbara and I got into the Murder, She Wrote series before bedtime. And it's endless. It goes on forever and ever and ever. But it was great. However hokey some of these things were, it was great. Angela Lansbury could not have been better. Her supporting cast, they had every older star appeared on that show. It was like, bring them in. Marty Balsam, there he is. Something.
Everybody. Van Johnson, Glenn Ford, a lot of them were on it. And I found out from one of my friends who was a free fix, $3,000. $3,000.
That was it. Favored Nations, huh?
That's it. Favored Nations, $3,000. So
back in the late 50s, if you did the lead on Twilight Zone, $5,000.
Really?
At least that's 75 years ago.
Steve, that's shocking, Steve. That really is.
Yeah, top of show on the Twilight Zone, the classic Rod Serling series back in 59 to 64, $5,000.
One movie you guys did not bring up that was a great detective is the movie Clue with Tim Curry.
Clue.
Yes.
Michael Caine?
No, that was Tim Curry.
You say Clute?
Clue,
No,
C-L-U-E.
Based on the board game.
Based
But
on
it's
the
interesting.
Clue.
But Clute with Donald Sutherland is technically a detective story.
Jane Fonda.
Yeah.
It was Jane Fonda. But Clue meant Colonel Mustard in the library with a knife.
Exactly. And Colonel Mustard was played by Martin Mull in that film.
Oh, always love Martin.
I want to have a vote here, guys, just mentioning Clute. Do we all feel that Jane Fonda was a very sexy woman?
If anybody doesn't, then they should change the channel.
Obviously, they've never seen Barbarella.
Ah, well, the only person who never felt she was very sexy was Jane Fonda. Read her book.
Well,
Interesting.
that's not unusual. A lot of beautiful women feel that way.
That's true. That's
So,
true. What do you think of my thighs? What do you think of my shoulders?
But we need women detectives. We had Cagney and Lacey, but that was television.
I guess Clarice Starling and Silence of the Lambs is about as close as we can get. But Women are taking over a lot of professions that were they used to be denied. I mean, they're playing cops all the time now. They're playing soldiers. They're playing superheroes. They haven't played professional football players yet, and I'm hoping they don't.
How great an actor was Peter Colombo?
Peter
Falk.
Peter
Great.
Falk.
Peter Falk. How great.
Oh yeah. Oh, great.
Actor?
He just had so much fun with that character. One Sunday morning, I was at Roxbury Park off of Olympic, and they had a little pickup basketball game. I ended up playing pickup basketball with Peter Falk. And he is a tenacious basketball player. You know, he only has one eye. He lost his eye. And he was driving to the basket every 2 seconds. I'll never forget that. Peter Falk and me playing basketball. He was like a 10 and I was a 2.
Peter Falk sitting on the dais of one of Dean Martin's roasts at the end of the dais, and Don Rickles is roasting, and Don Rickles looks over me and says, Peter, look over here. Look at this. Look this way. You know, with regard to the eye. Guys, as you just said, Steve, he had one eye. I could see him as a very aggressive anything. Yeah, sure.
I did a movie I produced with Peter called In the Spirit, and he was just sensational. He just was fun and a great guy to work with, and very, very took his craft very seriously. A lot of questions.
He's a salt of the earth actor, just part of the fabric of Hollywood that we
want to
love.
give you an underrated movie that I happen to like a lot. Didn't do much business, but it was called, it was about the Brinks job that Billy Friedkin directed. Peter Falk was in that movie, as was a whole big cast of guys.
Alan Garfield,
Alan Horowitz, Paul Soriano, or
Sorvino. But the thing about that movie was that movie opens up with the best Halloween masks I've ever seen. Everybody that's robbing the bricks have these masks that are great.
It was basically the gang that couldn't shoot straight, and it was pretty funny. You know, while we're at it, before we go, The Boston Strangler was a pretty good movie for what it was, and it was a detective. Henry Fonda was a detective, as I recall.
Well, let's see. Tony Curtis was the Strangler,
right?
And I think Fonda, was the detective. I believe that's right.
Here, I've got one for you, which did some business. Steven Spielberg directed it. Catch Me If You Can, where Tom Hanks plays a detective tracking down Leo DiCaprio's imposter. You guys saw that, right?
Yep.
Oh, yes. And Christopher Walken was great in that movie.
Terrific. Playing
Julian, did you see Jiminy Glick interview Steven Spielberg?
Yes.
When Jiminy asked him, when are you going to make the big one?
It's really something. I tell you, but it's a great genre. I'm glad we had a show on it, and I hope that we get a couple of more good ones, and maybe this new Bullet remake that Steve told us about will be something we'll like.
To our listeners, if we missed any, please let us know. Email.
Well, we're going to turn over the dais to our producer, our host, our benefactor, Mr. Mike Faber.
Thank you, Steve. You've reached the end of this episode of the Tales from Hollywoodland podcast. Always remember, we couldn't do this without you. We want to hear from you, so please write us anytime at talesfromhollywoodland@gmail.com. Remember, you can find us anywhere fine podcasts are found, and now you can even find us up on our YouTube channel. If you made it this far into the episode, why not like and subscribe and give us a thumbs up? Or if you're listening, please try to give us 5 stars. If you're into social media, please check us out on Instagram and Facebook. Before we get out of here, let's check with the guys and see what's happening on their podcast. Julian, who are you talking to this week?
I couldn't have planned it better, because she was in Detective Story. We talked about it. She was in Heat of the Night. We talked about it. We didn't talk about Shampoo, but it's Lee Grant, one of the finest actresses and directors, directed a lot of documentaries and interesting movies like Tell Me a Riddle. And Miss Lee Grant is on her way till this October will be 100 years old.
Holy,
That's so.
holy
That's so-
bejesus. Wow.
Wow.
Holy moly. So at 99, she sat down with me and we had one hell of a talk. So I hope you'll listen.
Now, you said she sat down with you. Did she get up?
I didn't get up.
No.
I was unable to get up. I'm still unable to get up.
Hey,
Well, there you
getting
go.
much here.
No, I said to get up.
Steve, what's cooking over on Saturday night at the movies?
Happy days, guys. I've got the two writers, Fred Fox Jr. and Brian Levant, who've written the ultimate tribute to the Happy Days TV series. And they tell us all about it. And in fact, I learned something all about the phrase jumping the shark, which supposedly means that the show ended after that or was downhill all the way. Nothing could be more wrong than that misrepresentation.
That's
Well,
true.
What does it mean?
Well, basically, what I won't give away everything, but essentially the show went on for another 172 episodes, and it wasn't the debacle they talk about.
Oh, I see. Well, the shark lived.
The shark lived. All right, there. Arthur, what do we got talking about on our podcast
We
next
got a
week?
great show coming that I'm going to let Julian tell you about with Steve and Julian.
No, I think I have to give it to Steve because Steve interviewed this man before.
Next week on Tales from Hollywoodland, we are going to be interviewing Steve Stollier, who is a confidant of Groucho Marx and wrote a book about him and their relationship. And it's quite an inside look at Groucho the later years.
Called Raising Eyebrows. And he also wrote for Dick Cavett Show. So, and he lived with Groucho Marx. It wasn't just that he knew him. He moved in and worked for Groucho Marx. So it'll be interesting to hear his story.
Awesome. On behalf of Steve, Arthur, and Julian, thanks again for listening. This is your producer and announcer, Mike Faber, and we will see you here next time on Tales from Hollywoodland. Your Hollywood adventure starts right here. Right here. Right here. Not there, but
Here.
right here.
Not there. Not
Right
over there.
No,
Here.
right here. Boom.
Right
And we're
here.
done.
Yes, hello. Let's talk about the Flopcast,
Every week, we give podcast listeners a chance to come and join us in Chickentown.
where we talk about Saturday morning cartoons, comics and science fiction conventions, music and concert reports, 70s and 80s pop culture, and for no good reason, chickens.
Boy, we're weird.
Oh, we are ridiculous.
We're proud members of the ESO Network, and you can find us at flopcast.net. This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.